Hey guys, it's Sam for Digital Meat in collaboration with rizom-lab. In this RizomUV tutorial, we're going to be dealing with unwrapping and the unwrapping panel. So I have a simple model of a cushion here in Cinema 4D. So with the model selected, I'll export it to RizomUV using the Rizom Bridge plugin for C4D. Before I begin, I'd just like to mention a couple of things. As a Cinema 4D user, I have set RizomUV's control scheme to C4D. This can be found up in Edit, Keyboard Mouse Customizer, and as you can see, my control scheme is set to C4D. So if my key mouse combinations are performing functions that yours are not, it's probably because you're using a different control preset. If you are using a different control preset to me, you can find a handy list of commands here in the main UI. Here you go, down the bottom here. On another note, I don't want to keep repeating subject matter that I've already covered in previous tutorials. This can be frustrating for viewers that have already seen them. So if you are new to RizomUV, I suggest going back and watching my previous tutorials. With that said, let's begin. Okay, so I have my select tool selected and I'm in edge mode. And a pretty standard way to unwrap this object would be to make a loop selection around the middle by double clicking an edge. Pressing the cut shortcut, C. And now that our cut has been made, we can unfold by pressing the unfold button up here, or with our cursor over an empty space in our viewport, use the shortcut U. Now it appears as if our UV view is empty. It's not. Our UV islands have been scaled. So with our cursor over the UV view, we can use the shortcut F, which will focus or frame the islands in the viewport. As you can see, our islands have been unwrapped and in this case automatically packed. As mentioned in my previous tutorial, this automatic packing only takes place if there are no pre-existing flattened islands. Okay, let's unflatten our object by going to the Unwrap menu here at the top and selecting Unflatten. So what if we only wanted to unfold certain islands? One way to do this would be to switch from Edge to Island mode. Select the island or islands we wish to unfold and hit U. This time only our selected island has been unfolded and no automatic packing has occurred, so we can just hit the packing shortcut P. There is actually a better way to unfold specific islands, so let's unflatten our object again. I'm also going to return to the edge select mode. And this time I'm just going to hover the cursor over the island I want to unfold and press U. The advantage of this method is that I don't have to leave edge mode and I can continue making cuts if needed. Okay, moving on. We can also determine not just which islands are unfolded, but what parts of islands are unfolded. So to demonstrate this, I'm going to select the drag tool and deform our islands. Now, if I go into point mode and make a selection of points, press the unfold shortcut key U, you can see that only the selected points have been subjected to an unfold operation. This selective unfolding also works with edges and polygons. So I'll just undo this, go into edge mode, same thing, unfold shortcut, same result, and also polygons. For the next part of the tutorial, I'm going to use a different model, so let's close RizomUV and go back to Cinema 4D. And we're going to export this model of an arm. So with that selected, press the RizomUV bridge button, RizomUV opens back up again. Beautiful. Okay, now our model is in RizomUV. I'm going to make a loop selection. And to better demonstrate my point, I'm going to go into wireframe view and unselect some of the edges. So we've got wireframe view there, and I'm going to control drag to unselect these points down to there and return to the shaded view. So let's now cut our edges. Then unfold and also frame our object in the UV view by hitting F. As you can see, our arm has been unwrapped, but the UVs of the fingers are overlapping. This is definitely not desirable, and RizomUV has the tools to help with this. Up in the Unwrap panel, we have a button called Overlaps. If we enable this, and then unfold and pack again, you will see that the fingers are no longer overlapping. Underneath the Overlaps button, we have a place where we can enter a value. This value determines room space. To show you what I mean by this, let's zoom into a gap between two of our fingers. Here we can see there is a slight gap between our fingers. If we would like this gap to be bigger, we can increase the room space value. So let's turn this value up and unfold again. We now have a larger gap between our finger UVs. Care should be taken when using the room space value, as large values can cause problems with the UV mesh. So if I give our room space a value of 1 and then unfold, you can see that our UVs are suffering from undue stretching, as shown by our stretch map colours, and if we look closely, also flipped UVs, which brings me nicely to our next setting. If we go back up to our Unwrap panel and enable the T-Flips button, we can prevent flipped UVs. So if I unfold again, we no longer have flipped UVs. You may be wondering why T-Flips and overlaps aren't enabled by default, or part of the unwrapping operation itself. The reason for this is because these settings are not always needed and would add more computation and thus slow down the unwrapping process, especially for heavier meshes. Okay, let's disable T-Flips and overlaps, close RizomUV and export our next model, which is this scan of a horse. Now our model is in Rizom, we can take a look at a slider in the Unwrap panel called Angles and Lengths, which is located here. This slider affects the optimise operation and can be seen as a bias setting that either tries to conserve edge length or the angle between edges. So to demonstrate, I'm going to zoom into an island. And with our slider with a bias towards lengths, I'm going to hover over my island and press the O key. Do that a couple of times. As you can see, the length of the edges are being conserved at the expense of the angles between them. This is useful if you want to reduce stretching, but I'm not too worried about the shape of the UV island. Let's undo this and then move our slider all the way across to angles. Now when we optimise our island, the angles between edges are conserved at the expense of edge length. Notice how the outer border of our island is less affected by using this method. This bias can be used to get a desirable result when the mesh type is triangulated or when you would like to preserve the island shape. Okay, let's go grab another model. I'm going to export this head. As is evident, this model has already been unwrapped, but we have a problem. Where there are holes for the eyes and the mouth, we have overlapping UVs. Now you may be thinking, why don't we solve this issue by turning on overlaps like we did for the model of the arm earlier? So let's try that. Turn on overlaps and then perform an unfold. You can see that this has no effect on our model at all, and we still have overlapping UVs. There is a good reason for this. The overlaps function only deals with the outer border or extremities of an island. To deal with overlapping UVs on borders in an island's interior, we need to do something else. Let's disable the overlap button and enable the Fill Holes button. Then we'll perform an unwrap again. We now have a mesh that has no overlapping UVs in the eye sockets or the mouth. The name of this button, Fill Holes, may sound a little counterintuitive as it actually preserves or widens the holes. The reason for this is because this function actually fills the hole with temporary invisible UV polygons to hold the gap open during an unwrap. Okay, moving on, let's close RizomUV and grab our next model, which is this tray type object. It has already been unwrapped and half of it is laying outside of the UV space. But this will not have an effect on what I'm about to show you, which is the constraints. In RizomUV we have the ability to constrain edges and points in multiple ways. This means that when we run an unfold or optimize operation, our constrained points or edges will be held in place or constrained in a certain axis direction. Let's start with a horizontal edge constraint. First off, I'm going to path select the edges along the top and the bottom of our UV island. So let's go grab right on the edge here and then hold Control and Shift, path select all the way down to there. And I'm going to do the same at the bottom here. Shift select to add to our selection and then Control Shift all the way to here. Now that our edges have been selected, I'm going to hit the horizontal edge constraint button, which is located here in the Unwrap panel. Notice that the edges have now changed colour. This is just a visual indication that these edges are now constrained. Now we can perform an unwrap operation by pressing U. As you can see, the edges are now aligned in the horizontal direction. This also works with the optimise operation, so let's undo and hit the optimise shortcut key O. Okay, now I'm going to undo again and select some edges that I want to constrain vertically. So let's grab this there, path select all the way down to here, press the constrain vertical button, do the same this side, let's choose that, all the way down to here. And again, press the constrain vertical button. Now when I hit the unfold shortcut, we have edges that are constrained horizontally and vertically. To clear these constraint selections, I can just loop select the outer border and press the unconstrained button here. And if I unfold again, we're back to where we started. Okay, moving on to pinning. With pins we can hold points, edges or even faces in place. To demonstrate this, I'm going to deform our UV island using the drag tool. So here's the drag tool and we'll just shift some of these UVs around in some weird and wonderful ways. In fact, I'm going to make the radius of this brush slightly bigger. There we go. Now our island is deformed, I've got my select tool reselected and I'm going to choose point selection. Then I'm going to drag select some points. Now we've got our selection, I'm going to hit the pin button in the Unwrap panel, located here. Our selected points are now larger, indicating that they are pinned. So now we can hit the unfold or the optimize shortcut. As you can see, the unfold operation has only affected the points that are not pinned. If we no longer want these points to be pinned, we can drag select our points again and hit the unpin button. Our points are now unpinned and will be subject to any unfold or optimize operation. I'm going to hit undo a few times to get back to our deformed island shape. There is another method that we can use to make pin selections, and that is by using the pin brush, which is selected over here. This works like any other brush in RizomUV, and its settings are up here in the top right hand corner. Let's go through a few of these sliders. So let's undo this. This value setting is basically the brush strength. If we take this down here, we can see that the brush border has changed colour, signifying that its strength is now weaker than it was before. Let's undo that. So we have a value of 100% and a value of 0, which paints nothing, obviously. So let's put this back up to 1. This pressure slider determines how much of the pinning strength is painted in one go. So if I lower this, you can see that it takes a lot longer for that to build up. And if I lower it even more, you can see that we have to paint over the same area to build up. This is basically an opacity value. So let's put this back up. Obviously the radius is the radius of the brush itself, and that increases that. The buttons in the profile section are basically a description of how the brush falls off. So you've got constant, linear, and a few others. I like smooth, so I'm going to keep it on that. Moving on to the raycast button. With this button enabled, a ray is shot from the camera view towards the cursor, and if the ray hits any geometry, a selection is made and the ray is killed off. So let me demonstrate. If I go into my 3D view and select a load of points here, you can see that those points have been selected and it's hit the geometry, the ray has been killed off, and this is what the other side looks like. When the raycast button is disabled, so let's undo this first, disable the raycast button. None of what I previously demonstrated happens. This means that points can be selected through geometry walls. Let's close RizomUV again and grab our next model. Just got a simple sphere here. Okay, so now we have our sphere in RizomUV. I'm going to reselect our pin brush tool and talk about the next button, which is this Use Normal button. First of all though, I'm going to change our brush radius size to 80 and our fall off shape to constant. I'm also going to disable raycast and our Use Normal button. And now I'm going to make a selection. I'm just going to make sure our geometry is within our brush size. As you can see, all points have been selected at full strength. This is because our brush is big enough to encompass the entire shape. The fall off is constant, which means there's no fall off in strength, and all points are selected because raycast has been disabled. Now I'm going to undo this and enable our Use Normal button. Now I'm going to make a selection again. As you can see, the strength of the pinning falls off. This is because as the normal angle of each polygon deviates further from the source normal, basically the place that I clicked, the more the pinning strength falls away. Okay, we're back with my tray model again, and I've deformed the UV island of one half of it. So next we're going to look at the Free Limits button. So if I go into polygon mode and select a bunch of polygons and press unfold, this is the right result we'll get. The unfold operation has only worked on the polygons that I've selected. So let's undo that. But if I enable the Free Limits button and unfold again, we get a really different result. So the Free Limits button is up here in the Unwrap panel. And if I unfold again, this happens. Let me explain what's happening here. When we have Free Limits enabled and perform an unfold operation, all of the connecting geometry surrounding our selection is completely disregarded. It's almost as if the rest of the island does not exist, or that our selection is completely separate from the rest of the island. To demonstrate this, I'm actually going to undo that, cut this selection from our island, turn off free limits and unfold again. As you can see, the shape is identical to when this was connected to the rest of the island and we unfolded using free limits. So let's do that again. This is a really good way of unfolding or optimizing internal UVs without disrupting the border edges. Okay guys, that was a look at the Unwrap panel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.